President Trump gave what is technically called a joint address to Congress last night, although more people know it as a State of the Union address, even though those don't start till the second year of the presidency. But he had J.D. Vance and Mike Johnson behind him, just like in a State of the Union address. And Mike Johnson brought some interesting guests there. He brought independent journalists, Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro, the independent boys of the Daily Wire, who are definitely not partisan at all. The Republican Speaker of the House brought them to the address to watch. They were his guests. There was a picture of them together on Twitter. You can see how much taller Matt Walsh is than Ben Shapiro. But yeah, these so-called independent journalists, independent conservative media, they're going and snuggling up to the Speaker of the House, one of the most powerful men in the country of the Republican Party, and attending Trump's State of the Union address. They probably got some pictures with Trump too. But they have the right to do this. Let's be fair. Of course they do. They have the right. If you're invited to something like this, that's very cool. Get to go to the State of the Union, be in Congress. But what does this tell us about what right-wing independent media is versus what left-wing independent media is? I mean, we see the people on the right, the Republican side, they unite. The right and their Republican politicians, they unite together. They go to events together. The right-wing independent commentators are not necessarily truly independent. I mean, they depend a lot on advertisers. They're constantly doing ad reads. Both Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh frequently do that. It makes you kind of wonder, how are they really getting their money? Are they getting funded through something other than, the ground up? I notice this a lot with right-wing movements, is they're not authentic, whereas left-wing movements tend to be authentic. But what's also hilarious is that recently David Pakman, while Biden was in office, visited the White House with him along with some other independent content creators on the left. And he made a tweet about that, about how, yeah, look, this was a gathering of independent progressive commentators at the White House, and a bunch of people in the comments were roasting him, saying, how can you call yourself independent when you're meeting with the Democratic president of the United States? And yeah, so he was ridiculed for that by quite a few people, including people on the left. But how is it that he's not independent because he meets with Biden, and yet people like Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro can be treated as independent even though they're meeting with the Speaker of the House, who is a Republican, this guy who's very much an establishment Republican too, very much so. And in fact, if you look at the smiles on Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro's faces in that picture with Mike Johnson, you can just tell they're just giddy about getting another tax cut. They're like, yeah, multimillionaires like us and the billionaires above us, they get a tax cut. But the middle class and the lower class, those fools, they're voting for Trump, but they're not going to get a tax cut, but they're helping us get a tax cut. That's what they've got to be thinking in those photos. It's just a cult in favor of rich people. Like, hey, cool, Reaganomics on steroids, basically. Let's get ourselves some more money. And it makes you wonder too, how authentic are they in their conservative advocacy on other issues? Because on social issues, they both take a very harsh tone, especially Matt Walsh. Matt Walsh even more extreme than Ben Shapiro. They take this really harsh tone, and it riles up people in their comments section. The people in the comments section absolutely love when they go off about transgenderism or racial stuff, DEI, homosexuality, same-sex marriage. And so, do they really believe this stuff that they're saying? Is it all just a ruse? Is it just a way to get clicks from socially conservative, poor and middle class people who hate certain groups of people? And on the other hand, though, Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro, they're like, yeah, we don't care that much about this, but we want to get them, get their money, get their views, so that we can get tax cuts for the wealthy. We want Republicans in office, but not so much for the social issues that we claim to care about, but for the tax cuts for ourselves. Because yeah, as I said before, Trump hasn't really achieved anything as president yet. He hasn't made life easier for any middle class or poor people. And in fact, the Republican budget, and this goes to my point about them just being happy about tax cuts, the Republican budget is going to be a tax increase on the bottom 95% and a tax cut for the top 5%. And they're going to cut Medicaid by $880 billion. $880 billion. So yeah, just save a bunch of money for multimillionaires like Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh, as well as billionaires, people who are in the top 5%, and sick it to those poor and middle class people. And yeah, I mean, Elon Musk Doge too, that's a huge part of this, is like Doge is effectively just redistributing wealth to the uber wealthy, gutting programs that help normal people. So I have to wonder, I mean, they purport to be really ideologically conservative across the board, but are they? Are they just motivated by getting money? I think that's probably that could be the case. I mean, Matt Walsh especially makes such a huge deal out of social issues. Nearly every single day he puts out a video on social issues, especially transgenderism and what he calls genital mutilation, what he calls DEI and racism against white people, abortion as well. Very, very anti-abortion fanatic. So it's like, do these guys really care about that? Or are they just backing the party that purports to care about it and purports to be against all of these boogeymen that they've targeted, because that party also happens to be the party that is more pro the rich, that is more pro uber wealthy people like them, and pro deregulation and pro tax cut. It's an interesting thing to think about. I feel like with Ben Shapiro, it's more likely. I feel like Matt Walsh actually might genuinely care about social issues, but Ben Shapiro might be a little more interested just in money generally. He's a little more restrained when it comes to social issues, so maybe he's not super obsessed with it. I mean, he still disparages people that he disagrees with as woke, but you know, that's so popular on the right anyhow, that it's like, well, whatever. How much does he really believe it? These people just slap the label woke on anything they don't like. So yeah, hanging out with the Speaker of the House, independent journalists, huh? That's ridiculous, you know. And progressives, they don't hang out with their Democratic politicians all that much. You know, they're actually independent. I know sometimes people like Brian Tyler Cohen will interview elected Democrats, but people like him are the exception, not the rule. So yeah, it just goes to show you how buddy the online right and the independent right, so-called independent right-wing media is with their politicians. And it's standing in stark contrast to the online independent left that actually is mostly independent, and the Democratic politicians. Really interesting thing to think about with regard to the media landscape in the United States. As always, please like, comment, or subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the Morris the Merrier, and I look forward to speaking to you in my next video.